know you've been a pioneer as a woman in the industry. It's a male-dominated industry, in particular in the role that you play. So what's your story around that? How have you managed that? What have you learned? What have you noticed as being a woman in this position?
Oh gosh. Well, when I started, there wasn't many women in the industry. I can really almost count. I think Sherry Jones was maybe the only manager. Sudha Karshe shortly after me. But like there wasn't that many people to have in terms of like women to mentor you or to look up to. I always say to young female leaders or artists, like try to find other women to mentor you, because that's the one thing I never ever had, And so a lot of it was you just learned as you went. And, I think from very early on, I realized I wasn't going to take no for an answer, because I dealt with all men. I mean, 99% men. And so I still use that slogan because, if someone says no to me, I want to do this with my artist. So I just find another way to ask that question and another way to ask it. Because the reality is, when most people are telling you no that are in powers of positions like that, they actually are just saying it to come from a place of power and ego. So there isn't really a valid reason for why they're generally saying no. And that's something I learned very early on working around all dudes. And I was like, why are you saying no? That's a really great idea I had, because I think other people want to own those ideas, or other people want to, in particular, maybe men would feel threatened, or back then anyway, because there wasn't many women. And the women that were in positions of power were generally like head publicity or something like that.
Specific parts of the industry.
Yeah, it's like that's super janky. You know what I mean? Like okay, that's the only job. And so nowadays, I mean, it's so great to see like all the women that are like presidents of
Yeah.
record companies, and I love it. I love it.
Yeah. What you're really talking about is how much has changed, and that when you go back and you look at even just a decade ago or a few, you can see that it wasn't the same. The landscape wasn't the same. So we see the change and we see the shift, but I think there are still dynamics that we have to navigate, as we know, as women. And I know in talking to you and laughing with you and sharing our war stories of being women in very male dominant industries, it's tough. It's really, really tough. And I think that one of the things that happened to me is I learned how to play that game and be at that table. And I lost a bit of a part of my softness or my feminine essence as I really started to mask with this masculine energy to try and kind of match what was going on. And I think sometimes I pay the price for that in my private relationship or in my own health, like real things, burnout, just pushing too hard sometimes. And so as I kind of transition into that conversation, you and I have talked a lot about mental health and wellness, in particular around artists. And I want to talk about that. But first, how about you? Like, how do you stay well? How do you stay balanced and grounded when you're doing so much?
Well, listen, the pandemic was the biggest blessing. I really, really feel like that was the earth saying, we need to take a break here. We need a pause,
Yeah.
And that was so exhilarating, because I think it just gave us time to dream and to really, really think about how, we always say around here, execution's Everest. You can have all the great ideas you want, but to execute
Yeah.
them is really another story altogether. And the pandemic was a really, really great healing time, I feel, even though it was so challenging for artists, because it meant we were the hardest hit industry in the pandemic, because it meant that all the live work, all that was gone, just like that. Even so, though, I feel like just this breath, we needed to take that breath. And so for me personally, it was a really great time to assess like how to really try to take care of myself. And, as you know, Toronto was in the biggest lockdown in the country. And so like even simple things like you couldn't go to the park or whatever. And so that brought on stuff like, okay, let's try to do some yoga, because you were kind of confined to your own home. Right. And so what are the ways we can do so? So that was really, really great.